Estamos grabando. Bueno.
Ah, qué bien. Ah, qué música.
Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio desconocerlo, que cuando los
Hola, hola.
amo,
Ahora aquí estamos.
su destino
Ah, ahí están tus
Tulum.
estudiantes.
lo negro del
Qué bien.
campo
Ah,
y en el alto cielo su fondo brillando en las multitudes el hombre que yo amo. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto,
Hola, hola.
me ha dado el oído, que en todo su
Estamos escuchando
ancho
a
de
Violeta
ancho
Parra.
día
El título de la canción es
música
Gracias a la vida.
radio
Y nada, es un placer para mí
palpitando
dar la
chubasco
bienvenida
y la voz
a nuestros invitados especiales de esta noche. Oh, sorry, I'm talking. So again, I'll say that in English. It's really happy to welcome you all, and to also um, introduce our two guests, special guests for today, Jorge Etcheverry and Gabriela Etcheverry, and we are very lucky to have them here. And so I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about do a little bit of a bio for introduction for them before we get to to the conversation part of this evening. So and sorry, Gabriela, I'm borrowing this from sources online, and I hope it's okay. So
sí.
Gabriela Cheverry is a Chilean Canadian writer, translator, and literary critic who is also known for her role in Hispanic Canadian culture, and so she was born in the district of Coquimbo in Chile, where she worked as a teacher in the capital of Santiago, where she also married. She arrived in Canada with a little skill in either French or English, but she received, or she, however, received her PhD in literature at Laval University, and she has two MAs in comparative literature and Spanish from Carleton University in Ottawa. And there are many things that we could say about her, and that she's a great friend um, from back in the day in Ottawa when I went to school there. She's again literary critic, a cultural promoter, and a co-director of the Red Cultural Hispánica, where she through which she's also organized various activities. She won the first prize in the fiction contest Nuestra Palabra for her short story entitled Nuestra Palabra, and she's also published Latitudes, a novel, as well as The Breadfruit Tree. And so, thank you. Let's welcome Gabriela Echeverry. And we
It
are
sounds
also
really good.
and we're also in the presence of Jorge Echeverry Arcaya, who was born in Santiago de Chile, and who is one of the founders of La Escuela de Santiago y del Grupo América. So these are poetic literary groups from Chile, and he's published a number of also novels and collection of poetry and short story. And he is the founder and editor of Speed Quotation La Cita Trunca. Um, so and again, a star in the constellation again of Latino Canadian letters, and of course there's a lot more than we could say, but I'll perhaps I'll leave it there for now, and also let's give a welcome to Jorge Echeverry. So let's I wanted to start. I know you we all had a chance to read the work, And of course, just a final disclaimer that we are recording this and for the purposes of publishing it on the literary journal of our department, Footprints. And so if that's okay with you, then but if you wanted to turn off your cameras, that's okay too. So without further ado, perhaps we could hear a little bit from Gabriela and Jorge. Maybe we could ask you to tell us a little bit about your life and your experiences. And so the floor is yours.
Who, Jorge or me?
Which we could start with you, Gabriela.
Okay, well, you want me to summarize my life in 3 minutes? Well, it is, what you've said is just one little thing that very useful, but the real life is somewhere else. And my writing is probably not what people expect, because I started writing after the Iraq war. It's because one different experience brings you back into your own experience. And this is what happened to me. I had notes written everywhere, and living at that time with Jorge, who is a literary just big figure poet and well known. And to me, it was kind of useless to start writing. But the Iraq war changed everything to me, because it's I was so invested in the wish of just not having it happened. And when it happened, it's just a kind of everything came back from our own experience in Chile. And then the images after the war, they started the images, young people being taken away, and then the Guantanamo Bay and all that. And so I just, I couldn't handle it without writing. So this is the short story Esperanza. It's precisely that. Is at that point, I decided that if I wanted to be sane, I had to write. And that was the process of selecting, what memories are important, and then put them in writing. So that is, for the rest of my life, it's just working and working and loving and loving. That has been all. If you have any questions, you please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Gabriela. That's so interesting that that this particular moment in history, right? A moment that you lived in already in a very much Canadian context,
Right.
somehow you connected with that, right? I think my students will have many questions, but thank you for telling us that, Gabriela. We could ask Jorge to say a few words before.
Well, that if I'm going to say, I started writing, in 1965, basically, in Chile, and was linked always with the 60s, because that Grupo America and School of Santiago were agrupations of the literary history in Chile, in Santiago. And politically, I was in the extreme left, movement of revolutionary left, But curiously enough, at the same time, there was this Grupo America. Grupo America was taking folklore and music, and posted to the slums, to the factories, And then was parallel to that, there was sort of the School of Santiago that was an avant-garde thing. See? So at the time, was no contradiction between being a committed, even militant, and writing some sort of avant-garde poetry. So certain a bit like the Europeans, Federalists were communists and this and that. Yeah. And then, of course, after that came the coup d'etat, and we have from 73, it was the coup, we hold up in Chile till 75. Then we have to come here, continue doing the same, trying to establish certain sort of instances for which the writers, always with the backing and inserted in the Chilean community, and doing some solidarity work, also we could develop culture. all over the world, culture always has been, in every country where the Chileans were exiled, the culture was a basic part of the work of denouncing the dictatorship, but culturally developing, the Chilean culture to the point that some instances, for instance, Sweden, I would say, in Mexico, Canada, has been were places in which there was this development, like nucleus, really quite important, apart from a lot of other countries, quite different from country to country. And here, of course, I start, the first thing was published sort of was avant-garde, about the escape artists, Cordillera. I helped to found this publishing house. And then, that I published La Calle, that was published in Chile, was a committed sort of poetry, So these sort of things have been going around. And also the prose. See, I wrote, this novel of Dogs and Binoculars, Chácheras y Larga Vista. This is a sort of exiled character. Is not the standard one like Leandro, for instance, Malas Juntas, or sort of a collect call that is more standard sort of I would say refugee or exiled writer, but this sort of thing was a marginal among the exiled, the Chácheras y Larga Vista, and that's it. Lately, it has been sort of also trying something on science fiction. My latest novel was a novel science fiction was called Los Herederos, The Inheritors, but also happened in Canada, So that's it, and the stories, and try to do the same thing that we are doing. But also, I would say that the Hispanic literary endeavors in Canada have been sort of, they're a bit back. There's not sort of the same dynamic that used to go in the past. The publishing houses are closing, or they are not working so much. They are not really periodical publishing sort of instances, either online or in papers. So,
thank you, Jorge. I find it very fascinating, to think about the way when I was doing my undergrad in Ottawa, I came to this cafe El Dorado, and I found a very active Chilean community. But of course, by then, so I guess what I'm interested in, and also Gabriela, in your prose, I mean, we also see sort of this sense of Chilean community in Canada, right, in Ottawa. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? How you came to be a community in Ottawa, outside of Chile, and maybe a little bit about that.
Well, they say that we don't choose our family members, but and we're supposed to choose our friends. But when you are outside your own community, the people that you relate to are the people who have lived the same experiences. And this was a case with us. There was a small Chilean community, and when you are isolated, when you are in an unknown country, everything is different. So you want to be together with the people who share the same ideas, the same tastes, and everything. So we did everything together. I mean, we went to meetings, we had parties, and in one of my short stories about Miriam, I don't know whether you've read that story, but it's you're always you're kind of islands that you are together, but you're not together. You're separate because you don't have the root, you don't have the context. And that, to me, that was incredible, that you can write, you can live, but kind of in a bubble. I mean, not the bubble that we have now with COVID, but I had the impression that we didn't have, or I didn't have, this space that that I was living or not living, really, just existing in a vacuum, and so that helped us. The being together helped us. Now, as we are being more Canadian and more integrated, if you want, this has changed, and we have lived separate lives, because every people have found their own different ways of communicating with the Canadian society. But at that time, when we just arrived, that without that we would have perished. Really, it was terrible, and so it helped us a lot to just for the first time, because we've all lived same experiences. We have been uprooted and trying desperately to create a life for ourselves. And we came, I mean, what I would say, I always talk from my own experience, broken. We were broken. And so in order to just put yourself together physically, because it's not just psychologically, but physically, I had the impression that I had to gather the parts of my own body and make another one that would enable me to continue. And with that, it's you just take everything that you have, that you can get, in order to recreate yourself. And what this patched up person is a different being from what you were before, or because we just the linearity of your life is not there anymore. So you're just broken, and then you start all over again. But what I was made of before, it didn't exist. I didn't even have a past. So that's my book, Latitudes, was an attempt to create a past for myself, because I had the impression I didn't have a past. So was it real? Didn't know. I had to go and find out. And so that was a very good experience in trying to heal, in a sense, to see this I was that, I'm not that, but from that I can recreate myself and be another person. So these are more or less the important thing that we got with the community at the beginning, and then everybody found their own way, their own path.
Thank you, Gabriela. So I love this idea of well, it's very tragic, right? But I mean, but also healing, like you say, like this recreation of the past, and because we've seen some narratives, some films here where we think about trauma and memory in that respect, right? And so I don't know. So you don't have to answer, or you could answer this question in any way that you or Jorge might want to. But so in that exile, right, in that having to leave your home, what were you able to take with you in terms of, I mean, this memory is also, but like, were you able to take photographs, and like, what is it that you were able to take with you to serve as sites of memory? I don't know if that's a good question or not.
Okay, well, what happened as an anecdote, we came here fortuitously because, we have this chance. I tried to get out to France. I tried to get out to Argentina, to Mexico, to Costa Rica. Was no way, yeah. And then, there was a teacher here that was called George Jackson at Carleton University, and a couple of my friends came here to teach language there and to finish the sort of some studies, postgraduate studies, and they sent me a little contract to teach Spanish. Was nothing, but for immigration that means unemployment, and that give us the chance to come as an immigrant,
Oh, I see.
And that was sort of absolute, because I never thought coming to Canada, because I didn't know nothing about Canada. The only thing that in 1967 was a centenary or something like this. My Uncle Guillermo was a chief of the YMCA in Chile, came here, and he took sort of an annuary of Canada there, and he said, if you want to go to Canada, they give you land, because that they populate things like this, So we came to Canada without knowing nothing, and without being sort of a piece of we didn't even know the culture. like when you came to the people that went, for instance, to France, to England, to Mexico, they have sort of the writers, they have some precedent. Like, oh, you know, you France, you know, Baudelaire, Rimbaud, etc.
Mm.
Mexico, Octavio Paz, and you came to Canada, is nothing.
Nothing.
So there's not a cultural reference in
Mhm.
Chile or in the world, so to speak, in a lot of places about what is Canada, what is the literary sort of thing that a writer gets some sort of something to get. Like, well, you know, I came to, you go to France, oh, Proust, and this and that was the cafe that where Sartre used to have his cafe with Simone de Beauvoir, you know, yeah. Here is nothing, it's a vacuum, you see. And then that is strange. The other thing, of course, you know what Gabriela was mentioning. Sometimes we have 5 meetings a week. And then, you know, we have to be with the family and the kids on Sundays and Saturdays. We were really without having any contact with the world because we were at the Spanish department, you know, teaching or studying. Or I was sort of also sometimes watching floors, like and doing sometimes, you know, beds and hotel with a lot of other Latin guys, you know, and or Metis or whatever. To the point that once I remember I was doing cleaning some floors, and some guy, I was really fast all the time out of temperament. You know? And a guy, I hear a guy that was complaining because I was giving them bad impression with the boss. I say, oh, se modite español la. He thought that I was Spanish. This se modite español la. He said, oh, so it was something like this. We were sort of in this sort of, in a way, as she said, we didn't went out. And also, you know, in my case, the thing of the identity was not lost, but and was not a crisis, because I remember after several years here, I had sort of I have a sort of I think that was I thought was an epilepsy because I have convulsions and this and that.
Oh.
And in the end, it was sort of a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow.
That I want to say. And at the time was not diagnosed as such. It's because, you know, was such tension. For instance, see somebody at the university, and you have to get with a card to get to circulate, and then you see the same person in front of your house going around. There is somebody, for instance, you go to the bathroom at the public library, and somebody signed you for not saying hi to me in the street because I was being followed. So it was something like that. So that was the crisis for me. Was the thing here to the point that I say, well, I come here to retire because I didn't consider I was going to be able to keep even living. See? So so was well, that's it.
No, thank you, Jorge. I really I love your prose where you talk about this sort of this connection to other people that were, for example, cleaning, right? Other Latin Americans who were cleaning alongside you, but what you say right now is really interesting, that they would tell you you're working too fast, right? Is that what you're making the other people feel bad? Or seem bad, I suppose. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Gabriela. I was thinking maybe we could hear you read some of the texts that we shared with our students this week. Let's see here. Who would like to go first?
Up to you.
Damas primero, they say.
Okay.
Damas primero.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriela. Please.
What part of the text do you want me to read?
Does anybody want to hear a particular
section of the short story? No?
Maybe. Hi. Yeah,
Hola.
I have a suggestion. Maybe the second paragraph of the Esperanza.
Okay. My body tells me that's okay. So I'll start now. My body tells me that I'm exhausted. Am I really? There must be something I have overlooked. No matter how hard I try, I can't find anything else that needs to be done. Jorge, my husband, is already sitting in the living room with a book in his hand. I like looking at those, looking at his long, elegant hands holding a book, so different from my brother's hands, skillful with heavy tools. The lingering smell from the waves of soapy water that I had sloshed into every nook and every surface of our house has finally gone, replaced by the stronger fragrance of the Christmas cake I baked this morning. Before I went upstairs to put Esperanza in bed, I left everything ready for a quiet evening with Jorge, music, pastries, and the traditional Chilean liquor that I made with tequila instead of aguardiente. We are used to making do with ingredients not quite the same as the traditional ones. The sparkling lights of a Christmas tree that looks almost alive sent out happy flashes from one corner of the living room, reminding me it is time to bring out the presents now that Esperanza is sound asleep. I had finally managed to get a Cabbage Patch doll for her after placing orders in every possible store in town. I have a cardigan for Jorge, and for myself, well, I found a music box in a second-hand store. I put his name on the card, pretending it is for her, but I'm sure that she is not going to look at it twice after she sees her doll. The music box is a little wooden house with flowers and a bench under the window. The graceful dancers are obviously newlyweds. She's dressed in white. He is in black. A little wind-up key underneath the frame links spring to a tiny metal post attached to one of the woman's feet. She turns with the music, one hand on her hip, the other holding the male figurine, who dances freely, both his legs up in the air, trusting her not to open her hand and let him go.
Gracias.
No hay por qué.
Wonderful. So perhaps we could move on to a discussion with Gabriela first, or maybe to. Does anybody have any comments or questions after the reading for Gabriela? So we're shy right now. Or your impressions? I mean, if you want to. So keep thinking about it. What I've really I found this very fascinating, Gabriela. These are there's sort of the tension that's created in the text, right? It's a tension that sort of it starts off really sort of slow, and then all of a sudden you're in the sort of this very evocation of a traumatic moment, right? And I also, because we're in this class, we're thinking about memory, and so these echoes of, for example, and I know we have Jorge here, right? and I know you might, if we ask you, so how do you see the connection between this, like your creative act and your own memory or your own experiences in, I don't know if that's you know what I mean, but like for example, it's almost like there's an imaginary that's created there that ties, and I always found it very fascinating, that ties to a type of experience of coming to Canada, right? But I guess that's a very broad question, but how do you see your practice of thinking of memory, your own life, and then how do you think of the creative act on the other hand, or how do they come together?
Well, memory is a funny thing, because you have what happened, you have experiences, but they are very elusive. It kind of comes and come and go, and you don't know whether they are real or not, especially when your own self is in turmoil. But you have a few facts, things that you know, and around those facts, those experiences, there are feelings. And those feelings, you have to, it's like you have to feed a cadaver, in a sense that you have to feed a dead person with dress it up with feelings, because if you don't do that, it won't work. So whatever experiences you have, then you have to start putting meat into that substance to make it real, to make it work. And with that, you start, first of all, it's very hard to choose whatever pieces you are going to start dressing up and put them together. And then they have to connect to whatever you are now, because that self is gone and you have another self now. So what is the connection, and where is the connection with the environments, with the environment that you left, the environment that you have now, the people involved, everything, society, Canadian society, Chilean society. And this is the way that memory works for me, or doesn't, I don't know, at least this is the way I build up my memories. I don't know whether that would answer your question.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Gabriela. That's so great. And that brings me to my other. Could you also read for us the poem about on Terry Fox? Could you?
Oh, I talk to Jorge first, and then I'll bring it.
Okay,
I don't have it with me, but I'm going to print it out immediately. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so no, thank you. That's fantastic. Jorge, do you want to would you like to, we could read I was hoping does anybody have any suggestions for what you would like to hear in the author's voice?
Could be exiled.
Exiled. Okay, perfect. And well, thank you, Lorena. We'll project it here for Jorge. 1 second. One second. Looking for the text. Jorge, there we go.
That is
Exiled. Aquí está.
you know, this thing was published in Casa de las Américas eventually, long time ago, in Cuba, the magazine, and this and that. Exiled. They told us they were leaving, that they would soon return, but we knew we wouldn't see their anxious faces again. Eyes dilated with fear and impossible dreams. They will cast their roots far away from us. They will sow their seeds in earths of unimaginable colors, impregnated with different odors and unknown sounds. Land on which we only know the name we cannot pronounce. Let's watch them soaring up like a flock of birds suddenly frightened by the hunter's gun. A certain void seems to have settled among our populations. A generation more brave than any, with eyes as frank as and open palms, is the one that now packs up its belongings and with anticipated journey walks for the last time along certain streets. Let's leave to the older ones the tasks of crying. Let's be happy for them, the best ones, the ones who live, the ones who won't see their wings clipped, their eyes blind. May they flourish like 1,000 flowers in other lands. May their sons be a changed, healthy fruit. May they know how to tell them tales before going to sleep about this land, about us, about what they have left behind.
Gracias. Gracias, Jorge. Beautiful, beautiful. So this brings, I mean, I think this brings, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind, and, you know, a lot of thoughts to mind you know, again, before we go back to Gabriela to ask her to read Terry Fox, which, you know, I see Terry Fox as sort of a symbol of the present, maybe, right? Of the present, at least the present of the poetic voice. But in this poem, right, you talk about leaving, and then the idea of return, and I just wanted to ask you both, in a sense, what it, you know, what does it mean for you, this idea of return? How has it changed for you as writers, and you know, or as people who, I mean, would you define yourselves as you know, so yeah, I guess this concept of return, I'm just sort of curious on how that's changed for you, the possibility return, or the actual return, or the return through memory. Like, how has that changed?
Okay, that I'm going to. This Gabby is a bit silent, you know. And I have been going back to Chile, you know, and what's happened that I never really lose contact completely. Even nowadays, for instance, I am a member of a magazine that publish every month, and I publish things there, and I keep publishing in Chile, you know, and articles and poetry and stories and this and that. And so I keep this sort of this contact, you know. Other thing is living. I remember that the first time that I went to Chile was shocking, for instance, not just to hear everybody speaking in Spanish. I got not used to that. And even, you know, I have lost, Gabriel is different. She has a connection with roots, with a family that is a big clan. They live in a specific place and this and that. And they have a sort of a lot of ideologues in the family. They have sort of something, to the point that I have written lots about here, sort of in a way, family, you know, and where they live and this and that. But in my case, different, you know, Santiago changes. Then you know, I am not physically thinking of going back. Besides, if you go back to Chile, you don't last there. First of all, you know, the tension is incredible. You cannot sort of afford to live in that. Even the smoke and the tension of the daily life would liquidate you. Besides the political thing, you would be forced to intervene in politics and this and that. So that's it.
So when you first left Chile, did you always had a sense that you would return to live? Was that something, or how would you, if you look back, what kind of sense did you have when you came to Canada?
Yeah, para Jorge o para mí?
Let's see for Gabriela.
Most of the Chileans, when we just came here, we never unpacked. I mean, our suitcases were ready to go back, just waiting for the news that you know, somehow the militaries have disappeared and things came back to normal. But you know, the weeks and months and years. So at one point, that's we have to unpack and start living somewhere. So. But in terms of the return, we are not. I'm going to take another angle from what Jorge used. You are not accepted there because you're no longer Chilean. Even if you are, even if you have your family, they see you as a stranger. They see you as the other now. And so you are in a place where you are the other. Because you're not Canadian, but you're not Chilean either. So at one point you have to choose where I am more, or more. That's it.
Right.
I accept it. In here, this is not. We are not. We will never be accepted as we were in Chile, because we will never be part of the community. But we are accepted as any other immigrant group. So it's different. And at one point you have to decide what is more important for you. I just spent time in Chile, and I know that it's. I love it, but it's they don't accept me the way that they accept other people. And here, at least, they ignore me. So that is a different thing. So that's the, apart from what Jorge had said, is what I wanted to add.
No, thank you, Gabriela. And it's, to me, again, it's fascinating, this universe that's created through your work, through Jorge's work. And he just said that he writes about your place of origin, right? He writes about, is it Antofagasta, is it, or
Something. My place Coquimbo. Coquimbo.
Oh, Coquimbo.
Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
But no, so I really sort of, I love that, and I think there's sort of a lot to explore there. Thinking about, so what is home, and where, and belonging, right? I'm also fascinated by your poem about Terry Fox. Would you read that for us?
Okay. So we meet again by the river center. Your young body now, but a likeness, just as I saw you that day. But it's hard to chat here, Terry, with all the hustle and bustle. Some look our way and raise their hands as if to brush away a shadow from their eyes. Most, though, pass by indifferent, never knowing or ever forgetting. Do you recall that day, that endless street in Ottawa, with you running and I abreast, running and weeping? You with one good leg racing against death close at heel, I hanging by your side, the luckless life within me. I kept pace as long as I could on the empty way, running and weeping, the beating of our feet sounding up from the uncaring zone below.
Gracias.
No hay por qué.
Yeah. So, sorry, Gabriela, go ahead.
The idea that you were, when you started changing, recreating yourself, the Canadian landscape, the Canadian society, the Canadian environment, really, you are connecting in the only possible way you can with your own experiences, and it's these are the way that it happens to me.
Thank you, Gabriela. I don't know. So, I don't know how everybody. How did you read this poem? Because I felt sort of a beautiful. So I'll just say it. Sort of a beautiful, like, motherly connection with Terry Fox. I don't know if that, or at least a very loving connection with this young man in the poem, right? And so.
Well, there were two lives that were destined to die.
What's that?
The life inside me. There were two lives that were destined to die. He was destined to die, and my child was destined to die too. So the connection was a mother and child.
Right. Wow. Thank you, Gabriela. Okay, and talking about this connection between this connection of motherhood and also childhood, perhaps we could ask Jorge to read the two Gabrielas, I believe it's called.
Gabriela Grande, Gabriela Chica.
Exacto.
Oh yeah.
I'll share the screen here. And let's see here. Where is it?
Oh yeah. Well.
¿Dónde está? ¿Está al principio? Aquí está. Okay.
Okay. And this one, has been translated into Italian even. It's quite nice. I really like it. Gabriela the Big, Gabriela the Little. Gabriela the Big, Gabriela the Little are almost the same size. So people would see them drinking coffee or walking along bank. They sound the same on the phone. Hello, is Gabriela there? Which one? The big or the little? To whom I'm talking? To the big or to the little? So say the usual suspects, companions of thick and thin. So nowadays it's more the thin than the thick, if you get my drift. Gabriela the little is as big as Gabriela the big, who's getting less big, like all of us as we get old. So she'll never be as short, even if she gets to be 100, as the short Chilean woman who say, my, she's a tall one, this big Gabriela, as they look up. But not at all. There's people here who are much taller and people who are quite short, like someone I know who can find shoes to fit or reach high shelves and complain that big people consume too many resources, take up too much space, pollute the environment, and waste a lot of energy. She told me little people drink to compensate for their size. So I asked her, what's happening in Japan then? Yes, but nearly all the people that I know drink heavily.
I love that poem. Very nice.
So again, thank you, Jorge, for that.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so again, a very sort of beautiful and complex world. This idea of the exiled as a bird, right? As a flock of birds that fly somewhere else, and then yet also perhaps something else here, right? In this space where you're able to connect with someone like Terry Fox, on the street, and it's sort of very, and in this case, and I think in the short story Esperanza also this connection to the next generation, right? So I just wanted to thank you again for being here, for allowing us to read your work, and we'll open up the discussion to any other questions or comments that students might have for you here. Muchachos.
Don't be shy.
Muchachos.
Okay, Daniel. So they're a bit shy about talking, I think, because I told them
Okay.
about the video. But Daniel says, if I could ask you between the relationship between the music, between music and your work, right? So I'll let Gabriela. You want to talk a little bit about the connection of music to your work?
Well, music have evolved as I have evolved, I hope, for the best. And in this short story, music played a role because I was desperately trying to look for something that would bring this person to life, because I was kind of dead and with sorrow and all that. So this the music in the poem it has a very important role, and we use for that. For the Chilean people also, the music, our music also was very important. Without that, with that, people felt part of something that they have left behind, but was still with us. And now I don't hear any Chilean music. I just prefer the big masters and classical music, and we would pass all the now with the granddaughter also the K-pop, whatever, it's in the air. But in relation to my work, just the Chilean music a bit, and then the popular music that we hear in Canada.
Thank you, Gabriela. In your short story Esperanza, right? Gracias a la vida is what triggers, right? Um, how would you, I guess, right, is what triggers the episode, or what sort of brings the action to a climax, would you say, or how?
Oh yes, yeah, because I was looking desperate for our music. I thought that if I could find the right music that would wake up Jorge, would just make him be alive and with me at that moment and not get lost, because this is my fear, that he would get lost. But you know, my music in a sense betrayed me, because as is gracias a la vida, but we know that that woman, you know, committed suicide. And so how could you know, the huge contradiction that singing one day, gracias a la vida, que me ha dado tanto, and the next day you are dead and by your own hand. So it was impossible not to use. And I used and for that I used the French Canadian music, because I knew he loved it. I knew Esperanza loved it. But yeah, that I mean, I wanted that. I didn't find it. I wanted that. So at the end, I got with Violeta, and probably that's why we separated at the end. Violeta did it.
Or Violeta.
Yes. You have to blame somebody. Yeah.
No, it's a very powerful moment, I think, and you know, yeah, I've always been fascinated by that. Jorge, did you want to add anything about music?
Basically, no. Look, well, here it's absolutely that there was an play of poets in Chile where they asked poets, you know, to have text about the songs, and I say I choose Bregovic, Jaivas, and the Beatles, I think. And then, you know, in my most sort of more specific poetry, that is a long poem with long paragraphs with different kind of voices that intervene, is like jazz sometimes. I find some of my poetry, and even I have written something like this. They are a counterpoint, contrapunto, between, like in the bebop, and that is I would say more like in terms of formally, not in content. Apart from this author, I consider Jaivas, Latin, absolutely, and then of course Bregovic, even Kalashnikov, and whatever, you know, and then of course the Beatles, But you know, in terms of music, it would be more the structure of some of my writing, and that it would be sort of.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you. So Ryan asks, she says, I really admire how you both can skillfully write poetry and prose, because it can be hard to be comfortable in both of these forms. Is there usually a common reason for why you choose one over the other for a certain writing project? Are there certain differences for you in terms of what these forms accomplish for or through you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if I want to tell a story, there is no way I have to go to resort to short stories, and most of my work are short stories, because there's no other way to say what you want to say, and to have the time and to use the tools of the language. But if there is if there is a feeling, an idea, then it's very hard to create a story with that. You have to create a poem, because in a poem, you know that there is another kind of layer of meaning. You leave the basic meaning behind, and then you get up to another plane, and then from there you create using your idea, using that feeling, and that is what you want, that feeling to somehow to be a poem. And for that, the prose just don't work.
Mm.
That's my experience. Jorge for sure will have his own. Yeah.
Well, you know what happened is that when we born, in 1966, 68, we asked, in the manifesto of the School of Santiago, I sort of I said that, well, there's no difference between prose and poetry, and we tried to make some sort of agenda that was between both of them. Even for that, I am a bit known because of this sort of thing. But on the other hand, I write political when it was the time of writing political poetry. I wrote La Calle was absolutely different from my other poetry that is the escape artist, that is yeah. And then of course I also have written short stories, but of all sorts, like in some like micro short stories that have been around the place, and then of course the political stories, or even that science fiction. I published a book that was called Apocalypse with Amazonas in Toronto. Just was basically sort of fantasy and science fiction. And in Chile, I was included some years ago in an anthology of contemporary Chilean and Argentinian science fiction. And my last novel published is a novel of science fiction, a dystopian thing that happens in Canada, but it was published in Spanish. And then I wouldn't say, but of course there is some subject you cannot get. For instance, when I start writing all these texts that for me are the Coquimbo series, the first one was published Casa de las Américas a long time ago, and then the other sort of stories related with this subject is where Gabriela used to live, and the hills, and the port, and the slums there, and all the magic thing. This thing has to call for sort of with prose. So more or less, as she says, the content takes you there. See? If I want to do parody, a brief parody, I have to do anti-poetry. It's called anti-poesia. That's the other thing that I really like. Well, that's it.
Thank you, Jorge. Any other comments or questions? I thought I saw a hand a second ago. Yeah, Aman.
I'll just get on for a sec. I was just gonna ask, with your experience parenting while kind of working through your own trauma and also just working through all these kind of difficulties of experiencing home and the kind of limbo that you kind of end up existing in when you come here, not because you want to, as I guess a lot of immigrants do, but kind of out of necessity. It kind of creates a weird feeling of identity and home. And then also just dealing with trauma from these experiences and not wanting to forget that, but also not wanting it to take over your life. For example, in Esperanza, it kind of comes over you. It's not something that you want to happen, but it just kind of comes out of nowhere. How does that influence your parenting? How do you want to go forward to make sure you're not imparting intergenerational trauma about these things, so that potentially your children are not having these same experiences or these complications, but also not wanting them to forget?
Very complex question, and very difficult to answer too. When I came here, I just was pregnant with Esperanza, 8 months pregnant. So when in a few weeks, I just went to the hospital and I didn't even know how to say push. And and from there, it's when you are in your country, the first thing that you present to your parents is your child. And here you have nothing. So it's your child is in a vacuum too. Now, how do you relate that after that? So that is the important thing. How you do your role as a mother and or as a father without passing all that trauma to your child. it's impossible, I guess, to avoid that, to avoid some, part of our trauma. But in a sense, if you are conscious of what's going on, you will protect that child as much as you can. Not completely, but you would protect the child. Like in my story, I just wanted to create for her a Canadian Christmas, not a Chilean Christmas. And so this is what you do all along. You create kind of, you have a system where, she is going to be different, but it's impossible. I remember one day I was talking on the phone and I said something wrong, and she said, she was 4 years old, says, "Oh, mother, you should know better," because she was ashamed that I didn't know how to say something very common, very ordinary in good English. And so they, in a sense, they become your parents. They become your parents because they have to do things that you're unable to do in the new context, and for them it's just natural. So it's really, it's a lot of things going on there. And but to me, the way I did it, I just raised her the way I was raised. I mean, just leave her alone. Just, I don't believe in satellite parents or all that. I mean, she would have to figure that out because this is her environment. And whatever I say and I do, it won't help her. All I can provide is the love and the physical necessities of life. If I create for her that environment, a secure physical environment, and with all the necessities of life covered, and a lot of love, lots of love, then she will be all right. And I think she is all right. But yeah, of course, there are things that affected her, and I'm sure of that. Does it answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, Aman, for that question. Jorge, did you want to comment on that as well, or?
I would say that, for instance, I think most of our sort of, in a way, in my case, was sort of more like a reflex sort of education for her, because when to a certain extent, Gabriela was working in another schedule, so I passed a lot of time with her. And then, even I teach her songs, and little jokes from Chile. And then, with the time, she started developing even writing sort of, in a way, capabilities that she, at a given moment, about 12 years old, I got her to be published in a magazine in Ottawa that was directed by a guy that was a poet laureate from Ottawa, Patrick White, that is now deceased. He said, well, his story is incredible. And then all of a sudden she decided to stop writing because she found it too easy. But then, without myself being in any sort of pushing it, she became sort of, in a way, addict to literature, and to study it, and become sort of, came out leftist and this and that. Just recently, there was a filmmaker from what I was called Leuten Rojas. He made a film about 2 generations of Canadians, of Chilean Canadian, that was presented here and this and that. And sort of he made myself, but also her as the other generation. And that is the sort of thing, like, to a certain extent, that not all the parents have had the chance to see the offspring came to a certain extent, I wouldn't say with both worlds, because I just don't have both worlds, I have just one. And what is the original mind, the one that I keep in a sort of a capsule during my life. But the Canadian part of it also is well developed to a certain extent, thanks to other interventions, with educational interventions. But I think that, for instance, that in a lot of Chilean cases, there's not this sort of the same keeping of the harmonization that she has between her Canadian, so to speak, part and her sort of in a way Chilean
Mm-hmm.
part. That in her case, and this sort of has, I think, part of the natural, but part also maybe our influence. Who knows? You know?
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, it's very. Thank you again for that. It's really fascinating. Especially as someone who's also, you know, my dad's from El Salvador, someone who's also, and I'm part of a sort of 1.5 generation, you would say, and so I think
Yeah.
I identify
1.5.
with Gabriela La Pequeña, right?
Yeah.
Fatima, your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us your poem and everything. I wanna question. Do you think that what you write is a way of making a testimony of what you have lived? And if so, do you think it helped you to cure the nostalgia of living far away from Chile?
That's for me.
Yeah, for
It is a testimony. As I said before, the Iraq War was the trigger for me. That because I saw another country, another region of the world, and the people suffering exactly what we have suffered, and it just brought back all the memories and everything. So it helped me in a sense to get my own sadness, my own things, out and put it in writing, because you cannot spend. I worked a lot all my life, so I spent a lot of time working. So I didn't have time. I didn't have time for crying or being sorry for myself, and I don't. I always said, I get to feel sorry for myself. After that 3 minutes, I have to stand up and do things, and so it helped me to to get to those memories, to take them out, but in a form that is not fear, that is not sorrow, that it's something that you could read and you could see. It's an object, really, an object of yourself, of your past and your present, and what happened. And so in that sense, it's personally. And the other part of your questions, can you repeat the second part of your question, please?
yeah, sure. That is so. Do you think helped you to cure the nostalgia? I think you answered my question.
Okay, yeah, you're cured in a sense, but there's always something there that, in my case, it will never ever disappear. There's always, the a loss that is, and yourself too. This is you have two lives, not. And if you look at it in a positive way, well, that's perfect. But your first life is broken, and then if you use it in a good way, if you use all that you have inside you, it will make you better. Your second life would be one life plus. Yeah. So this is my experience. Obviously, it for each person is different. Maybe Jorge has a different experience. I don't know. And you're pretty.
I wrote an article in 19 when in a magazine of a long time ago, about that they identified in the Chilean case nostalgic, avant-garde, and commitment. That were sort of the elements of the Chilean literature exile here, but also all literatures from all immigrant communities, all sort of in a way exiled communities have this sort of these elements, and of course they are quite sort of in a way like the shock or the shock between the world that is left and the world that is sort of the new world, the contradiction and the harmonizations among them. That you will find it as a universal subject, you know. And even inside the same sort of community, you have a lot of different versions of it. For instance, what Ramon Sepúlveda or Camila Reimers or Gabriela, and even myself, you know, have different sort of modalities of the same sort of the texting. And of course, there is a certain therapeutical sort of in way function of writing, you know, because, you know, if I have not been writing, you know, Jack, of course, maybe would have had sort of lot of maybe more problem that I have, see, to a certain extent, you know. Yeah. And then, of course, you know, that writing was something that to a certain extent get you out of yourself and then connect you with the public. This public real or potential or whatever, you know, what is there. And then, you know, you feel like by the act of writing, you are communicating something with somebody else, even if there's nobody there. And also that's a part that can sort of help. See? And also bringing up to all these things, you know, bringing up nostalgia and this and that, but also sometimes can bring up other characters. Like, for instance, for a while, I was writing poems in English under the pseudonym of Patrick Fillmore, who published them in different magazines. But this was not me, it was somebody else. It was a whole sort of alter ego that I created for that purpose. Being a Canadian, was a Canadian poet.
Thank you, Jorge. That's fascinating. And so do you have a collection of the works of Patrick Fillmore?
No, the thing has been published in several magazines.
Yeah.
In sort of, and also in Talks and Binoculars, Charla Legalista, there is some poems that are quotations of the poems of Patrick Fillmore. Patrick Fillmore is sort of, in a way, is an Irish guy of the 60s, you know, Irish American and this and that. Yeah.
That's really interesting, Jorge. Nice. So I think so. It's interesting because it's sort of the complexity of your literature, and Gabriela is a sense of speaking of home, of belonging, of Chile, but also connection to something else, right? And so whether that be the violence and the injustice that's happening in Iraq during the Iraq War, or other examples of such connections, like with Terry Fox or with other Latin American immigrants in your prose, Jorge. It's an interesting intersection, right, of how, I don't know, how memory but also the present works within that context. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but maybe if there are no more questions, or Lorena, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for reading your work. It was really amazing to hear it in your voices. I'm intrigued about I want to ask you, Gabriela, if you write in Spanish also, and I'm intrigued because you are talking about this previous person, like a broken person, and I am wondering if you write in Spanish, how this fusion. I think it is like an intersection, and you are here and you're present, but I think you are like traveling in time to put in words your memories. But yeah, I'm intrigued. What is your relationship with your writing and the language, and what motivates you to write in English, or yeah, just that.
Very interesting question. I think it's for me, Spanish is my language, and it will always be. But the language of everyday life is English. I mean, Not in the routine things, because my husband, although he's Canadian, he speaks Spanish, and Esperanza speaks Spanish too. So in that I haven't lost the language, but for working is the English is for the Canadian society is English, and for working is English, and for writing. It's really again, the content determines the language, and I like to write in both languages different things. For instance, if you read Terry Fox and if you read Esperanza in Spanish and then in English, they're two different things. I mean, obviously everything is there, but it's what you are trying to get is. To talk is to the audience, and you're in the Canadian culture. Things that I said in Spanish will never ever, get it will never pass because they are completely different. So you have to find a way of conveying the same meaning, but in a different way, because the culture is different. So you are always aware of the cultural differences, and if in English, if you're writing a story in English, you can think in Spanish if you want, but that won't work because the culture is different. So you go from one language to the other to get what you need to say, and at the end you get your content according to your audience and to whatever you want to to convey and to whom you want to say things. Does it answer your question?
So my apologies to the Spanish students, to the students in the Hispanic Studies program. I should have sent you the Spanish version of the text that we read for today. It was just a lapse in my own. But perhaps we could send them these texts in Spanish, right? If we ask the writers to provide the authors to provide them in Spanish, it would be great to also read them in
of course
in Spanish.
No.
Jorge, you want to comment on that last question of language and?
Well, that in a way, personally, I think that I never really mastered, the English or French or whatever, and to the point that in a way sometimes I happen to publish sort of in a way something, a short story in English. Then, with the time I review it and was really bad, and I publish another version in another magazine. And then I realized that also this one is not sort of in a way definite, because I other people say, oh, I write in English and in Spanish. But no, most people that I know, maybe with exceptions, like in a way I know Gabriela is more or less bilingual, and the other one that I knew at the given was Luis Lama, curiously enough. But for me, never is going to be the English. No, never am going to feel secure enough just to publish, not in media or magazine, but I published recently a book, of short stories in English, different kinds, called Outsider. And we will see really with Sharon. Sharon is my companion, She's a translator also, apart from being a lawyer of immigration, whatever. But then I wouldn't feel at all comfortable with English at all. That in a way, Gabriela is far more secure with her language, with her management of the English than I.
Thank you, Jorge and Gabriela. So in a sense, this question of language, it could also be connected to the question of home, right? And how do you feel at home, and with what language? And so this, it's a fascinating thing for both of you, in the sense that Jorge, the works of Patrick Fillmore, again, this is a Irish Canadian, you said, or French Canadian?
Irish Canadian.
Irish Canadian. So it's an interesting exercise, right? And sort of So
No, because you know that also I had another guy, that's called, well, Arturo Méndez Roca, but he's a Chilean that lives now in Luciana. And there is a woman that is Maria Juana Petra Soler, Giovanissima, that is a Chilean poet that lives in the same town where Gabriela Mistral lived. Those also are different, and there is alter ego of them like this. Some of the one that I use.
And it's different, like sort of playing with the idea of embodiment, right? Being able to embody, or like Gabriela say, to give life to right, to.
I think this is more like in a way she had a solution of, but for that I don't have. So I had to create another character. You see.
Gabriela, did I cut you off? I think I might have.
No.
Oh.
Well, it's interesting that there is several alter egos, and one is a woman. And some people have loved the poem that he had written, being a woman. I find it great. Yeah, that's 3 or 4. Arturo Méndez Roca and the Patrick Fillmore and that one.
That's fascinating. So maybe we could acquire a few pieces by these authors as well, Jorge, for the journal. It'd be great to. Julia says, I'm always so curious to hear how other expats relate to their language, and it's great to be able to hear from people who also make creative choices about which language to use. So it's more of a comment. And comment. Did you want to speak to that, Jorge? Or?
You know what happened in my case? It really doesn't apply because I came here at 29. I never was good at languages, and this girl, Julia Garcia, she can choose. Maybe she's bilingual. You see, in my case, never was. Gabriela is far more bilingual than I am. See.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. No. That's it's really fascinating. Okay, so if we have no more questions, do you have any more questions or comments? Oh, Tata.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I was wondering if you have a relationship with the new narratives, digital narratives, and if you are interested about it, or I don't know, what do you think about the technology and memory? That's it.
What is new narrative? Sort of thing?
Like,
what
for example, a website with some project with testimonies or poetry.
Oh yeah.
And the
this
relationship.
Sort of thing,
Exactly. Yeah.
Like basically, you're talking about the use of the media.
Yes.
The use of the media, basically. And the tendency to record, not much.
Yeah,
no.
What do you think about it?
I got just to the point of, in a way, I have a couple of blogs. I put posts, usually, in Facebook, and in other places. Usually, I use illustrations that I made specifically or not. I have hundreds of illustrations and text like this, But I haven't really go more into that. What I see, that is the virtual world sort of is favorable to certain sort of thing. They want sort of short and sort of in a way simple. That is the the media is the message, that whatever. So for that reason, the media nowadays demands like for instance the short story, the brief story. It's a gender practically fostered by the screen, the capacity of the screen, and the fact that you have to have something simple, short, understandable immediately, and also with some sort of level of how you call it, empathy, really big and point. Yeah. It's interesting, but well,
if I could just also add to that, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. If I could add to that Jorge Etcheverry, he I think the website's down now, but for right, Jorge. But for the longest time, Jorge had a website called La Cita Trunca, which was a sort of gathering place of for literature of the diaspora, but also of different writers, different. I mean, from all walks of life, and I believe in Spanish, maybe some things in English, right, as well, right, Jorge?
But it still is there. Eh?
Oh, it's still there. Okay, it's still perfect.
But
So great.
but nowadays you have a lot of magazines with a lot of visual things and this and that. That is
Right.
now is obsolete. It's quite obsolete. It's just text. So
Well, but I mean, again, a gathering. I've always seen it as a gathering place, as a place where.
yeah. At the time was really nice when you know,
Mhm.
this yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that's great. It's fantastic, and well, thank you both. I think we'll won't take any of your more of your time, um, and we'll just well, thank you for visiting us. Unless anybody want to say anything, any final thoughts, or so let's give them a nice word of appreciation. Thank you so much.
Well, it was great for me to meet your students. They're beautiful. And they're great.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Thanks a lot for this opportunity. You know, it was great. See?
Thank you,
And
Jorge.
thanks to you and all the students. And once you know, Felipe won a prize for his anti-poetry in a contest that I organized, you know, some years ago.
I remember
I was
that.
a worldwide contest about anti-poetry.
And
Thank
Felipe
you,
got the
Gabriela.
prize.
And Felipe got a prize, yeah.
Full disclosure. Full disclosure.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Jorge, Gabriela. It's so nice to see you. You know, after so many years. I hope that once this pandemic's over, that we could visit you in Ottawa, and do a big
Okay, we hope so. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Always welcome.
Thank you, Gabriela. We could do a big poetry reading there,
I
and
hope so.
and invite these beautiful graduate students to join us as well.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Just to have a chance to talk to them in person.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yes.
And goodbye, good luck,
goodbye. Thank
and
you.
be safe.
Thank you. Yes.
Muchas gracias.
Oh, de nada,
No,
chica, de nada.
Gracias.
Un abrazo.
Preciosa.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Gracias.
Okay, you're very
Very
welcome.